Welcome to the Epic Lifestyles Podcast, where we interview people who take life to the next level. They search for success past the mundane surfaces and experiences many of us are willing to just live with. These people set themselves apart by their daily achievement. They are willing to sacrifice a little something more than the rest of us to achieve their idea of success. Hi, my name is Anyssa C, and I sat down with Nic Leloup, a 28-year-old Londoner from the UK who in 2016 headed down towards Piccadilly and ended up living on the west coast of Canada in a little village we call Whistler. He is an Ironman. Last year, I was lucky enough to sit down at the finish line with Ron Zalko, who brought this epic event to Canada, and it was great to follow up this year with one of the competitors who finished. I met Nic at the Whistler Core Gym where I work. I started there in July and got to see a little bit about what it takes to build an Ironman and what it takes to recover, as this is a few weeks later from such an event. I caught up with Nic at the Beautiful Nita Lake Lodge here in Whistler the day before he was headed back to London to catch up with some friends. Thank you for listening to the next episode of Epic Lifestyles. You can find more interviews at epiclifestyles.ca. Hi, it's Anyssa from Epic Lifestyles, and I'm here with Nic Leloup.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we are here at the Nita Lake Lodge. We have a beautiful lake in the background. I've already been up the mountain once today. What did you do today?
Today, I'm going to London tomorrow, so I had to get a lot of things together and pack. Sort my life out for the next 2.5 weeks, so yeah.
Pretty exciting.
No mountain activity today.
Unlike your life for the last months.
Yeah.
So the reason I invited Nic here today, it's okay, we'll just leave that in, is because I've got to watch him preparing to do an Ironman and got to see after as well. And it was really interesting to kind of see a little bit of the back end of how much work it takes to do something like an Ironman. So last month I actually got to interview someone who did the Epic 5, but you know, it was from a distance, it was over the phone, whereas I get to actually watch you come in, watch you out on the road biking, because I would pass you while you were out on the road. You probably don't know that.
Didn't know that.
And be like, there goes Nic again,
Yeah.
you know, and got to see some of the work that's actually behind doing an Ironman. I felt really lucky. Last year, I actually got to sit and talk to Ron Zalko right at the finish line of IronMan. So he brought IronMan to Canada. And so it's great to see the next step in living here in Whistler, because we're all pretty intertwined with the event. So how did you decide to do an Ironman?
How? Oh my
Because
God.
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So seeing it here last year is I guess, the initial reason as to why I chose to do it. Because I'd had no experience in triathlon or any endurance event up until that point.
Did you have a specific event that you did compete in?
When I was 19, I did a 10K cross country in London.
And can we ask how old you are now?
28.
Oh, okay, old man.
28 now. Yeah. So like, why did I do it? This is what I'm trying to figure out. I put a lot of my body on the line and big investment.
Close and a little closer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the easy answer would be it's a personal challenge. That's what everyone would expect you to say.
Yeah.
But I thought about it a bit more, and I figured, wait, hang on, there must be a deeper reason as to why I chose to do it. When I remembered, when I was 2, I was with my parents in France, in Provence, and I was on my dad. And I've spoken to John about this, and he thinks it's a perfectly logical reason as to why you would choose to be stupid.
We both know a gentleman named John Block.
John Block.
And if you're from Whistler, you pretty much know who John Block is.
Amazing. And yeah, when I was 2, I was in France with my parents, and I was on my dad's shoulders, right? And he was in the morning, and he obviously fancied a croissant or something, and decided to head into a boulangerie, a bakery, a French bakery. And I was on his shoulders, and he momentarily forgot I was on his shoulders. He quickly remembers having walked through a door frame lower than 6 foot, and he remembered at the point when everyone else, probably in the street, realised I was no longer there on his shoulders. And when I was 16, we went back to that exact same bakery. It's still there, and the impact dent on my head is still in the wall. So I trace it back to make a decision stupid enough to do an Ironman. 1 year. Having no experience, I must go back to that. I'm sure.
Bumping your
This
head.
is my dad. Thank you.
I thought you were going to go
Yeah.
with the fact that you saw the Tour de France or something, because I've never watched the Tour de France ever in my life until I met John Block, and we the place I met Nic was at the gym. I work at a gym.
When did I meet you? When did you start there?
I started there
April.
July 7th.
Oh, was it July? Oh,
July 7th.
okay.
So it was
So you saw the very
deep
last
into your journey, yes. And John Block had the Tour de France on, and I've never watched the Tour de France, but he actually explained all the details in the hills and stuff, and I was like, that's insane.
Yeah, it certainly is insane.
And this is while he was helping you with some of your training.
John helped me from the start. Without him, I don't think I would have been able to get out the lake in one piece.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I had to still figure out what the hell I was doing myself and to tailor it to how my body was feeling. And it's 10, 11 months, gradually learning and adjusting. But the injury, I had a lot of body issues that I had to always manage and try and mitigate for. And it was very exhausting and tough. Long for much of the last 7 months, I would say, 8 months. Very painful.
I thought that lake piece is something I didn't really understand before, but I live on Alta Lake, so I got to watch a lot of people practicing.
Yeah.
I saw people in the boat lane too, because I saw the rowers too going, please wear a bright red cap when you're out in the middle of Alta Lake swimming, because there's these rowers that they can't see anybody.
Yeah.
But I went down on the morning of IronMan and was just going to watch from the dock, and then I ended up going back and getting a paddleboard. So I got to actually,
on the lake?
I was out on the lake, and we actually paddled in, because there was quite a little regatta of paddleboards and kayaks.
Yeah.
And we paddled in the last couple people and cheered them on, and we saw one girl that they were resuscitating her on the side. And when you're done in the water, you're so done, and it's right at the beginning. So you're seeing the beginning, like the end of someone's journey quite often.
Yeah.
Because they didn't make their time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to watch.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was my first mass swim event. I hadn't done any in my life before that. Up until September, I hadn't done any swimming training since I was 10, 9, 10. But obviously, I'd had enough practice in the lake to the point where I was going into the swim completely comfortable and relaxed. Mm-hmm. And the fact it was the hottest day of the year meant that the water temperature was the warmest I've experienced. It was 22.5 degrees, and for me, it was like the swim was by far the least painful and most enjoyable part of the day.
Right. Well, I know that there was some talk about not having wetsuits on, and
it has to be over 24.8 degrees, I think, for it to be wetsuit illegal. Mm-hmm. Something around that, and so we were way off that, and we'll never ever get to that temperature. Right. John said that all the years he's been here, 20 years, he's never been close, and that was a hot period of hot weather pattern. Even that, and they only got to 22.5, so it was still wetsuit legal, and I swimming with 1,500, 2,000 people. It didn't bother me at all. It's like really enjoyable. Yeah, and people you bump into, but you're so comfortable in the water. I was. It's fine. Yeah,
that's awesome.
It was fine.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to get into so on Epic Lifestyles, we always ask the same questions. What are the 3 things that are the most important things that we should know about you?
Most important?
3 most.
Okay, maybe important subjective, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
totally.
It is. So I'd say, well, now the most important will be the most fun for this purpose. So most fun things about me. I think and this isn't always a good thing. I think most of the time it's not at all. I'm very competitive against myself.
Right.
I guess a large part of that is being competitive, is trying to compete against others too, in my head. And therefore it makes me even more competitive against myself, to the point where sometimes I do things which I shouldn't do inside. But it's interesting, when I decided to sign up for that, my dad, for example, and a few others, they were like, why don't you just do triathlon to start with?
Oh, so you've never...
No, I haven't done a triathlon. I haven't even done Olympic distance or anything. And I said that to John, and he was like, nah, you're okay. Yeah. It's a goal. I've got time. So I was like, okay. I don't know if his optimism's encouraging or lying.
I find his optimism encouraging daily. Because there's things that I go and do, and he's like, yeah, just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, and yeah, so I am very I'm very competitive against myself.
Okay.
Which I think
Number 2.
is good. Number 2, a fun fact.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I know every state capital of the US.
So you're smarter than some Americans?
Probably.
Okay, that's cool. And number 3?
Number 3, when I ran across the bridge naked 3 times in the middle of the town. University.
That might explain IronMan as well. That's why you have no problem just running around.
And then it goes back to that knock on the head when I was 2.
I think you're using that as an excuse.
Yeah, it works, doesn't it? So yeah, there's 3 fun facts. So.
And we already kind of alluded that this is a challenge for you because you're not sure what you want to do for the rest of your life. What is work and what is play?
I'm an engineer, so the physical definition of work is force times the distance that force is applied. It's Newton's, right? That's a scientific definition. My own definition, I was thinking about this, and for me, what work should be. Now, I think work should be an activity that you exchange your time for, which is worthwhile and beneficial to yourself and to society in general. It has a net benefit to yourself and to society. Should. That's an ideal sort of ideal scenario. And for me, so I use the example of my training. For me, work was swimming, doing laps in the pool. Yeah, because it was worthwhile, it was necessary, but it didn't benefit me too much more than that. It wasn't something I found gratifying. However,
I got to see how work was like to do the Ironman is work. Like you can't take a minute off. You can't. You have to be so focused on what you're doing, and you have to treat it like it's a job.
Yeah.
To achieve
some of it.
Just to finish.
So the other side of that, play. My definition of play is an activity you do which primary goal is gratification of yourself, your senses, or whatever. So swimming in the lake for me it was necessary. So it was more than work because it was necessary. It was beneficial. It was worthwhile, it had a net benefit on me for sure, and it was gratifying.
Right.
So you've got both the same activities, just a location, the situation.
So triathlons can be play.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of self-gratification in there.
Yeah.
But it's also...
So the lake swimming for me was an example of play, worthwhile play. So.
That's cool. Well, my goal is to be able to just swim across the lake because I'm, as John knows, I'm terrified of dark water. So if I can just get across the lake, that's going to be like a huge bucket list item for me. So
you'll definitely do it. It's something you'll take a bit of getting used to, but once you're used to it, it's easy. Like, for me, it was really interesting because a lot of people who are good swimmers, even in open water, their fear tended to be not seeing below if the water's murky and not knowing what's below. That's like,
that's
consciously you're.
And I know where it comes from. It comes from growing up. I actually got caught under a group of kids when we were out in the pool at night when we weren't supposed to be. So I know where it comes, and I got caught underneath everybody carrying a big rock, doing a dare exercise. But I also grew up with a woman.
You were stuck?
I was stuck. So I had a panic attack. And so when I get out into deep, choppy water, I panic. I notice that when it's calm out, this is Nita Lake, but the lake we're talking about is one lake over. They're actually attached. When it's calm, I do a lot better.
Yeah.
Right? But I also grew up with a woman, Dorothy Hughes, who swam in the lake. She used to swim up in 100 Mile and Extra Lake, and she would swim every day.
Wow.
Not all year round, because obviously it would freeze at some point. But yeah, like I still have this. I have this personal hero that swam in the lake every day. So and I live on the lake, so I feel like it should be something I should know how to do. But it's deep, for me, weird fear.
Yeah, well, it's a common fear, and it's sort of rational too. Like for me, I hadn't had any real open water swimming experience until June, when the lakes were warm enough to swim in. And for me, it really wasn't. I had no anxiety as to what was below the surface. For me, it was the confidence in knowing I could swim a certain distance in the water without anything to hold on to, knowing I'll make it, even though I had the endurance over the winter I built up in the pool to make it. And there was one occasion I was in Lost Lake. And I had no wetsuit on, so it was still it was cold. It's the warmest lake, but it was still cold. And I was swimming with a friend of mine who was also training for IronMan. She's a very, very good swimmer. And she had a wetsuit on. She was way ahead of me. And we were swimming from one dock to the other across Lost Lake. Yeah. And I was already exhausted. I'd done training that day. I was exhausted, and I suddenly realised that I started telling myself I wasn't going to make it.
Interesting.
And I started to hyperventilate, and I was panicking. I was really my first and only experience of panicking in open water.
Right.
And it wasn't because of what was below. It's because I thought I've got no buoyancy. I had no buoyancy, no wetsuit on, and I had to call for her to come down. Just to, as soon as she came closer, I was like, I don't know if I can make up. I was panicking, but my confidence then came back knowing she was only 10 meters away as opposed to 70 meters away.
Right.
And that was scary. You're helpless, because like, you don't have that confidence if you can make the distance.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like I got full lifeguard training about it, but it's funny that deep water thing and your mind just takes you out.
Mine takes it. It's very weak. Yeah. But once I overcame that, I was swimming with John in Nita Lake, and once I overcame that, I realised, I'm actually quite good in the water now. Anything became hassle-free. So that's good.
So if there's one thing that we could help you do, a cause or something like that, what would it be?
One thing. It's difficult. I don't know. Yeah, it's a difficult question because for me, I try to always be very happy to ask people for advice when I need it. I think being able to identify when you need, or when you're not sure of the situation, or when you think someone else's opinion might be more valuable than what you already know. Yeah, I think it's a really good way to
finding mentors.
For finding mentors, but also how society learns. It's the basis of learning, and it requires humility as well. Because sometimes you think, just because he might know more, I don't want to ask him because it looks like I'm not as clever as.
Do you think people? Because I'm a good 20 years older than you, so I come from a generation where we didn't have all the connectivity. We didn't necessarily have all the mentors that you guys do now. Because you brought up in this different generation where you have access. You can get on email anybody and go, "Can you help me?" Yeah. And they can say no, or of course, or of course, hey, what's one email away, right? Like, do you find it easier to ask for help?
Yeah, it's certainly easier to access help, but I think for a lot of people, and me, I used to always be less inclined to ask for help because I thought, I could just figure it out myself. And actually, there's nothing wrong. It's actually far more beneficial to you and the person you're asking if you ask for some sort of support, because it builds a respect up as well. So in the future, they would more happily and more willingly, knowing you've got that respect and that you've got humility, ask you for advice. It works both ways. So I think it's not that you've got to have. It's an ego thing too, isn't it? So you've got to drop the ego to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah,
it's very important.
Oh, that's very cool. If you could pick one book that everybody should read, what would it be?
Okay. I better talk about the one I'm sort of working my way through now. It's actually, people know I'm a big fan. People who know me know I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
He's a Canadian psychologist. And his book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, it's like the best-selling book in the world at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So it's I think sold 2 million copies. And it's basically, he sets out 12 rules, that some of which are a bit obvious and some are maybe even cliche, but he backs each of them up with like a comprehensive long essay chapter that has got some incredibly empirical and abstract concepts in that cover. He's a psychologist, so it's very much psychologically based. He uses empirical evidence from his own clinical practice, from biology and science, from cultural history, from religion, anthropology. So he brings all these disciplines together. He's an intellectual, so his knowledge is quite phenomenal. And he, so the wealth of evidence behind each of those rules is quite incredible, quite amazing. And the whole premise of the book is, and his whole philosophy is, if the individual is living their personal optimum life, then that is the primary way society is going to be optimized as well.
Because they're going to put the most passion, care, attention.
No, exactly. If each individual becomes their strongest possible version of themselves on a psychological, physical, metaphysical level, then society will optimize eventually.
Yeah, the metaphysical level, that's an interesting one because it's come up a lot lately. Yeah. So if we could all get to that next level, it would be very interesting.
It is, exactly. And so, I mean, people would say it's a self-help book. It's more of a life mastery book, but it's also a history book. It's a psychology book in many ways. It's incredible because he brings all these topics together, and the way his mind has linked the connections between them. I mean, he's got a huge following now, and he's controversial at times too, but he's a phenomenal mind. And the book,
have you seen, there's a new TV show out called God Friended Me?
I have heard of it, I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Oh, well, I've just watched the first one, and it kind of takes that metaphysical, takes religion, and it takes this new technology, and how, like, if you're looking for those connections and watching out for them, or at least, you know,
you notice those things. Yeah,
you start to notice connections, and you start connecting people and seeing how important just the little things and the little details sometimes
absolutely. And the reasons for that go are so deep in our culture and cultural history and biological history and stuff.
Yeah.
And another book, and you might have heard of, it's called Sapiens. So I'm starting on
You're coming up with books I've never heard of, which is
Sapiens,
which is actually, you know,
it's hugely popular. And I'm just listening to it, actually, the book, and it's incredible. It explains how human beings, how we came about.
I love history, so
I've only heard great
how
things
we
about
develop
it.
things.
Yeah.
You know, people are like, oh, you have a BFA, which is often called a bachelor. But I'll take my BFA over an English degree because we actually study.
Some people have
art.
masters in that, don't they?
Yeah, I would love to go on and do a master's. I have not figured out how to do that at this point in life. But when you study the Bachelor of Fine Arts, you're studying art history, which is really the history of culture. And how it developed. And you know, you take an English degree, you write an English paper, you turn it in, right? When you're studying art history and creating art, you've got to use the history to explain what you've painted, and then you have to stand up and write a paper on it, stand up, explain it. And it's just like so much detail, and you have to somehow attach it into the history classes, and you know, so it's so in depth.
It's played a huge role in culture, right?
Yeah, well, and even we start, because in my degree we studied architecture and the history of jails, for example, and how they were built and why they were built in circles at some point, and you know, and how the Nazis built jails, and how you know, like this is how our culture is built, and how we've reacted, right? So it's really been interesting. But
that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so our history is really important because it's how we got here and how we react to where we are now. You know, it's built, it's stacked up.
Can't ignore it.
Well, apparently some people do ignore history, or even we won't even talk about the United States right now. What's your favorite thing to do in Whistler, other than come to the gym, obviously?
Damn.
Oh, sorry, did I ruin it?
Yeah, you ruined it. Got nothing. I'm done. Swim in the lake, you know, like since I've got into that for the training, that's definitely, I'd say, one. And hiking as well. Just hiking trails. I haven't really got into mountain biking, but that's my next. My next thing.
Here's my thing about mountain biking. Everyone I know who mountain bikes is really damaged.
Oh yeah, broken people. I tell you, yeah. You know.
I just left someone at home. She's going out to do the last ladies' night ride. And like, but do you remember the last time when you were here and I had to feed you drugs and put you to bed?
Yeah, remember that time? Yeah. I do.
Oh no, I'm gonna go. It's the last time.
No, I know. I don't know. I mean,
and I have other friends.
Never appealed to me hugely, but everyone seems to love it. So, I don't know. I'm going to give it a go.
The idea of the heli biking and stuff like that, like mountain biking here is such a skill. It's an art.
It is an art.
It's a
and
real
you get
art
the best
form.
in the world coming, and you get the craziest in the world coming.
Yeah.
And, so I mean, I'm not into that really, but I love hiking. I love the environment here.
I do love the speed of downhill on a bike. So
yeah.
But I just went from I live over in Alta Vista, so I came down the golf course down because my goal was Toad Hollow, and just coming down that golf course trail was just like, I'm like, yes. You know, and I think Whistler's the one place where I'm like, you know, they say on Facebook, it's like, at least when you're little, you knew where your friends were by how many bikes were out front, where they were. And I'm like, it still applies in Whistler.
Yeah.
You want to find someone, go look for their bike out front the bar or out front someone's house.
It's incredible how big it is here.
Yeah.
The mecca for cycle, mountain biking. Yeah.
What is a product that you are rarely without?
I'll show you. Thanks for asking.
It's funny, no one said the backpack before, by the way, because most of us in Whistler are with a backpack. I have like 5 backpacks.
Have you heard of one man, one ball?
No.
No, you have not.
Oh!
For the last 7 months, this has been my best friend because
I totally understand it because I actually now sleep with a ball.
Well, there we go, right? I mean, they're irresistible.
Yes.
For me, it's because my big problem in training was my hip flexors.
And that's
severely bad.
Yeah, so I actually have the 5-inch, and when I can't sleep at night because I have a bad hip here, I literally will sleep on the ball.
Yeah, well, I haven't tried that. I'm not sure I could sleep with it.
But you would need the 5-inch because I'll just sing into the mattress. That's my experience.
Princess and the Pea.
Apparently, I'm not a princess.
Yeah, I'm not saying that either. I might feel it. Yeah, this has been a bit of a lifesaver. It's allowed me to do the Ironman.
Yeah. Well,
So
and I
think
actually took mine on the bus to Vancouver, and so on the bus, I was sitting in this bus, and it was like so uncomfortable. I'm like,
I'm taking on my
I have a ball, and I'm like, oh, look. And this is another really good, just like across the chest too.
Yeah, when I flew WestJet to Toronto a few times in my training, and I mean those seats on the plane go from about here to about they recline about that much. So
absolutely.
So this would have actually helped a lot. So I'm taking on my Air Canada flight tomorrow.
Oh, it's so funny. This has been one of my latest as well. So that's too interesting. I just got, you know, at the gym we have the purple ball.
Yeah.
It is the most popular item in the entire gym.
It was, and I bought this.
Yes, and I found a green one, the same brand, and it even had a couple of little cracks at the reuse center. I'm like, oh, that's so going on with me.
Yeah.
It's been life changing. So absolutely agree.
Definitely life changing.
How hard is this one?
It's hard.
Oh,
so
that's tough.
You're not messing around with this one. You don't want to get it. You don't want to roll in the wrong place because then you'll feel it.
Yeah. Well, I actually also have a spiky magnetic one.
Okay.
I have.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of pain killing tools.
Oh, there's a whole variety of balls out there.
Yes. And the other one I found is the green. It's actually designed for tennis elbow. It's the green. It's a green rubber bar, but it has these huge rolls in it. And so if you take that down, it is amazing for breaking up fascia on your hips and your roll.
All right. Yeah.
What do you plan on doing in 10 to 20 years?
In 10 to 20 years.
I think I already know you. You don't know.
I hope my body's still able to work out and train and still adaptable and resilient enough to do half Ironman or something like that if I decide to do it again. I hope I still have the...
So I've been asking Nic for every week, I think now, since he said, don't ask me till 2 weeks after IronMan.
Yeah.
So I waited for 2 weeks, and every week I'm like, so are you going to do it again? He's like, yeah, ask me in a week. And so now I'm guessing that's a no.
It's almost certainly a no for a full. Yeah. It's almost certainly a yes for a half.
Right.
Because half requires, now I've got that base of endurance that
don't want to let it go.
I don't think it would disappear anytime soon.
And it's a skill.
Yeah, like it's sort of ingrained in me now, what the training involves, and mentally I know what it involves, at least to do a full. Yeah. And a half would be far more manageable, far more easy to train for, and enjoyable too. So yeah, that's certainly something I might even do it next year. If I'm in Vancouver, I might just do it next year here.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, because if you get a minute to read, and I'll put the link in, read Nic's blog, I can say it did not sound very enjoyable. Satisfying,
I was honest,
but not enjoyable.
I was honest
experience.
with how painful it was, but I did suffer like other people would. It shouldn't have been that painful because I had a back injury from last summer. I strained badly my QL muscle, and since then I've just had constant issues with my pelvis and hip flexors, to the point where I'd have to go to the chiropractor 5 or 6 times to get straightened out. I'd have dry needles at the physio. I spent a good
dry needling.
Yeah. I spent as much on treatment as I did on my bike, just to maintain, just to allow me to sit on that bike and ride. Right. And it was agony on the day. Anyway.
Gotcha. So our last question we always ask everybody is, do you have a life hack to share? Especially, this is so key. Leaving Whistler, leave us with a really good life hack.
Life hack. Oh
yep.
God. I really don't know it. A life hack.
Something that's made things easier that maybe somebody else could learn from your experience.
Okay, yeah. In that case, I've always been one to get very to make sure I'm very meticulous, especially when there's so much for me mentally riding on an event like that. And in the past, like with the university exams, I'd be obsessive as to my preparation as much as I can control. Mm-hmm. And that plays on your mind. That affects you. Anything, you want everything to be exactly in place as you want it. Any deviation from that just makes the situation far more stressful. I definitely experienced that the week or two leading up to Ironman. And at the end of the day, I keep trying to tell myself it's not worth that stress. It really isn't. It takes away the enjoyment, which you did a bit at the end for sure. And yeah, but it's easy to say, and it's far harder to do when you put so much investment into something like that. But it's chill out.
But you wouldn't change it, right?
No, I would change it. I would change how I'd believe into it, how I was, how I mentally prepared, and how I. But the thing is, there were so many issues for me. It's like I wasn't sure I was going to finish because of my body and the heat. I knew how hot it was going to be.
It was an incredibly hot day.
And I had no idea how much salt I'd need to take, and obviously wasn't enough because I didn't take anywhere near enough. Yeah. But it was an experiment.
Well, and I got to see, because I went and volunteered on the sidelines later in the day, so people was like, so I got to see people start, do the swim, and then I actually volunteered at about 5 o'clock, I think it was. So I got to see people not at the end, but for some of them it was the end because they hadn't gauged the salt.
Really? Yeah.
I saw a woman, she was just like, oh, she couldn't do it.
I was on the last lap of the bike ride. I had to get off my bike 3 times. People following me, it looked like on the app it showed I'd stopped in the Callahan for 40 minutes or something. I hadn't stopped that long, but I'd had to go off my bike 3 times because my cramp was so severe I couldn't do anything. And I couldn't even stretch because I'd run out of salt. And I thought 13 salt pills would be enough. I probably needed 3 times that.
Right. So it's really about knowing
your body. And I sweat a lot. I lose a lot of salt. But again, I had no experience to go on in that sense. So, but the conditions were extreme as well. So.
Sweet. Well, I hope you have a safe journey back to London. And I guess you're not coming back to Whistler after that,
I will be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I will be until I sort myself out with people. Yeah.
It's a good life. Vancouver life is good,
sure.
But Whistler life is better.
Yeah, I'm only 70 miles down the road, so I'll be there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on Epic Lifestyles. And yeah, it's been a pleasure getting to see your journey as well. And I will post Nic's website.
Cool.
What is your website?
So the website is eastcoaststateside.com, all one word. And yeah, I've got articles on there. I've got a couple of my IronMan journey and the aftermath reflection.
This podcast has been produced by the Communication Studio and Anyssa Carruthers at the Studio C. This podcast has been produced by the Communication Studio and Anyssa Carruthers at the Studio C.